The Partnership for Hope SF is a collective impact initiative organized as a public-private partnership consisting of the Mayor's Office of the City and County of San Francisco, the San Francisco Foundation, and the Enterprise Partners. Since 2007, Hope SF has focused on the transformation of 4 public housing communities into mixed-income communities. The 4 public housing communities are Hunters View, Potrero and Potrero Annex, Sunnydale, Velasco, as well as Alice Griffith. Hope SF is the nation's first large-scale public housing transformation and reparation initiative aimed at disrupting intergenerational poverty, reducing social isolation, and transforming neighborhoods without displacement. So today, we will explore 4 scenarios that are common within the Hope SF community. I will read the scenarios, and then I will pick a panelist to respond to them, and then after the panelists, we'll open it up for community to respond. And as Leslie already said, you have a space to write down notes, and you can read along with me and know when I make a mistake. So let's begin with brief introductions. We'll start at the end with Jason.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Liu. I'm the Policy Director in Community Development for the Hope SF Mayor's team. Previously, I was a legal aid attorney with Bay Area Legal Aid, where I worked on-site at Potrero, running a legal clinic there amongst the various legal clinics around the Bay Area that Bay Area Legal Aid serves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica LeGault. I work for Mercy Housing as a resident services coordinator, and I'm at Natalie Gubb Commons, also known as Trans Bay Block 7. I work with 120 families, and of those, 23 are households from Sunnydale.
Good morning. My name is Jeffery McCormick. I'm a resident manager with Bridge Housing. I'm actually at 1101 Connecticut in Potrero Hill, where we have 53 project-based PBVs and 18 tax credit, and 17 years, a little over 17 years in the business of property management and affordable housing. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity and what I have to bring to the table.
Thanks, I have one. I'm Alyssa Nickell, and I oversee programs for Shanti Project. We're the services partner at Potrero Hill. And I was just looking around the room and thinking, oh my gosh, 4 years ago I knew nobody in this room. And right now I feel like I know almost everybody in this room. There's definitely some people I haven't met that I hope to today, but it's been a real collaboration. So I'm excited to be here.
And I'm Cindy Heavens. I am with the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. The Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development has deep investments on the capital as well as on the service side of Hope SF. And I work as a senior project manager on the real estate side. So this is all new for me, so I'm perfect to ask questions because it is all new. So, first scenario. The Indigo family is a Hope SF household who has lived at Sunnydale for over 10 years. They are a 4-person mixed-status household, and a mixed-status household has at least one member who is not a U.S. citizen. The Indigo family is comprised of 2 married adults who are not U.S. citizens and 2 children that are U.S. citizens. The children are high school aged and middle school aged. They live in a 2-bedroom unit. Their total annual household income is $17,000 per year. However, because of their mixed status, the Indigo family received a partial rental subsidy from HUD. Their portion of the rent is $1,440 per month, which is 102% of their annual income, which leaves little to no money for items other than rent. The parents want to find better work, but are limited due to their immigration status. They also fear that in searching for work, their immigration status will be revealed and they may be deported. The high schooler is considering dropping out of school to work and bring more income into the home. So my first question is for Alyssa. And considering your role in your organization, how could you help to provide support to the Indigo family?
Thanks for this question. Just so you know, we did not know which question we were going to get. Hence my, You know, one of the things when I first read the scenario that I noticed was that they'd lived in Sunnydale for over 10 years, and their children are high school and middle school age. So clearly this is their home. And that's the one thing that when we start working with families, our model really is about getting to know who they are. And on a lot of these scenarios we'll see, we don't know much about these families except what we can see on the surface. Mixed status, this is what's on the paper. But this has been their home, and they've been doing it for 10 years. This is a resilient family. It's not that they don't know how to get by on what their income is. So that's one thing that we just want to hold in our team is, who is the family? Let's get to know them. The other thing that I'm noticing is, yes, of course it seems untenable. $14.40 per month, 102%. I'm going to assume these numbers are right. But I would have to say one of the first things we want to make sure is that the numbers are right. And so do we want to immediately take the family to our amazing partners at the Housing Authority who calculate the numbers really well? And we all make mistakes. And we all want to work together to say, let's make sure we have the accurate information. And once we have the accurate information, then it's really realizing that this situation is seemingly untenable. It would be seemingly untenable for any of us in this room. So who would we turn to? Who are our first natural supports? So really getting a sense of who are the natural supports for this family? Like I said, they've already been doing it. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure we understand the ecology of supports for this family. Do they have other people they work with? Are they already working with amazing CBOs that are in the community? You know, part of the question is, who else is out there? There are a lot of people out there who can support the community. Are they really aware of what they spend their money on? I know a lot of people are connecting with smart balance coaching and financial literacy. So does the family really, are they accessing and using all of the resources that are available to them? There are ways to supplement income which aren't just about getting money for rent. It's about getting money, I'm speaking to the choir, for all those other things that we pay for. There are food pantries, there are school supplies, barrier removal funds from so many people in this room. So are we as an organization really connecting with our partners to make sure that the family is accessing everything that they can? There's some things on here that, you know, I'm just looking at the emotions here. The parents want to find better work, but they're limited. They're afraid. The high schooler is considering. There's a lot of, they're questioning right now, this family. So how can we be with them and not tell them what to do, but really say, what are your questions? What do you want to do? What resources do you have access to? Are we sure that we want to encourage the high schooler to drop out of school? This is talking about long term, not just what's the crisis right now. We do know, and I'm hoping someone at the Housing Authority can correct me if I'm wrong, but children under 18, they can get a part-time job, am I right? And that's not going to be counted toward their income. And so we really want to do these things that are encouraging the family to increase their income, but in a way that's really sustainable for them, and it's going to turn into long-term sustainability for the family and really opportunities to increase their wealth. This is really our job right now in the city to remind these families that in San Francisco, we want to be able to say, you are safe here. So if you're afraid of talking about your immigration status, you're afraid of looking for jobs, there are organizations I'm looking down because I want to make sure I am talking. I had all of our navigators look at this scenario, and I hope I'm speaking for some people in the room who work with us. This is what people do. There are organizations out there who really will help people find jobs specifically for undocumented residents. So there are ways that we can look for opportunities where we can say, yes, we don't want to make promises we can't keep, but we have to make a promise that we can keep. And I think in San Francisco, the promise we can keep is we will keep you safe. If we all work together, we can keep that. Obviously, there's some things with our healthcare partners we can do in terms of making sure they have access to healthcare. This is also a situation which we have to work preventatively. We recognize that they're trying to pay their rent, but something can happen like healthcare. If they don't have it, that it's just the family's gonna spiral. So we wanna make sure that when we're looking at their world with them, that we're making sure we're doing the things that are connecting people with preventative service as well, so they don't get into that situation. There are opportunities to think about other housing that's related to Hope SF. So one of the things we've been doing on site is really connecting people to the RAD housing, where they're looking at fixed rents instead of rents that are connected to your income. So we've been able to, with the help of SFHA, really connect people to RAD units, which I think is helpful for the long term. In my organization, I have to say I am a leader, and that definitely asks me to take my ins in the way that I can. And one of the things that we've really noticed is that, yeah, we're often speaking for people, but for this community, we really want to make sure that we're building opportunities for them to speak for themselves. And one of the things that we're doing at Potrero is really starting something monthly with the mixed status families to say, you know, we can be your voice, but we're never going to be as good of a voice as you are. And we really want you to speak and say, this is what I need. I can't afford this. I've looked at all of the different things, and there are barriers. And I think if we're honest with ourselves as providers and say, yeah, this is where my system is failing. I can't do more than this. Then what becomes possible is, as leaders, we can go to MoCD or Hope SF and say, here are the barriers. Everyone's trying their best. We can't get past it. So at some point, there has to be a policy thing. That's where we are right now with mixed status families. There is a barrier. The money's not there. We will advocate for it. Or I should say, the money is there. We will advocate for it, but that's our responsibility to do that and really say, yeah, the community needs to support, or the community receiving support from one another is that's when they're at their best, and it's our responsibility to make sure that we do what we can to say this isn't working.
Okay, the next question is for Jason. Outside of your organization, what other resources exist for the Indigo family in this city?
Right. So, you know, the way that I look at this scenario, there's two different approaches and two different angles of attack in sort of supporting this family. The first angle is through legal support. So MoCD OSEA has, you know, funded a lot of legal aid organizations that sort of specialize in immigration, like Harrison and a lot of their partners, in providing a lot of immigration screening. Because the thing that stuck out for me in this scenario is that, you know, focused upon their citizenship status, when really the HUD subsidy, the federal subsidy, is you're eligible for that subsidy on multiple different categories of eligible non-citizen as well. There's about 13 different categories of eligible non-citizen. So just because the family has non-U.S. citizen households doesn't mean they're necessarily barred from the federal subsidy. There are other ways of getting the federal subsidy. And hooking up this family with legal supports that can sort of do that screening to sort of see if they sort of fit within any of these sort of non-citizen but eligible statuses for the subsidy, it would be sort of my first step here. In fact, when the rules changed, one of the first steps was sort of funding a lot of these organizations to do that sort of screening, and we actually found that there were a large number of families that were eligible for the subsidy due to some sort of non-citizen eligibility criteria. So that would be the first step there. For that family, but at the end of sort of that exercise, there still are a lot of families who are just not eligible for the subsidy. At that point, you sort of get into a city and state response. How do we as a city, how do we as a state sort of work together to sort of protect this family? And as sort of Alyssa pointed out, it requires some sort of policy sort of response, because the federal government, being what it is right now, we can't expect an answer from that angle necessarily. So how do we as a city support this family then? And it could be in the form of a shallow subsidy, which is currently being done right now. Perhaps an expansion of that shallow subsidy and a continuation of that shallow subsidy to sort of make sure that that family is paying what we consider affordable rent. Considering sort of the mixed status calculation there. Alyssa also mentioned this as well, can we work in getting these families into a differently subsidized unit that sort of has a different basis for their calculation for the mixed status rents? Because the sort of genesis of this problem to begin with was when the federal government during the Obama years changed the basis of how you calculated a prorated public housing subsidy for those families. So how do we sort of move them into perhaps a different subsidy program where we can sort of base the prorated rents on something else a little bit lower than what public housing is basing the rents on? So that could be RAD possibly, not necessarily, but it could possibly be RAD. It could be a different subsidy program as well. So these are some of the city and state responses that we can sort of garner. One of the sort of bigger questions that's not addressed in this scenario necessarily, but it's sort of in the background, is with these recent proposed rules by the Trump administration. And basically, if there's any sort of non-eligible member of the household, the entire household is barred from subsidy programs. That's a much bigger problem than what this scenario deals with. But as a city and state, we do have to look at that as a threat to our families, and how do we respond to that threat? And it's still very much in the early stages. It's probably going to be litigated. Hopefully, it will be stayed, but this is a reality that these families will have to deal with, and it's a reality that we as a city sort of have to start mentally preparing ourselves for, just because we do need to sort of prepare as a city as to how do we sort of support these families if that worst case scenario comes true. Just sort of riffing on it, but could there be a city or statewide subsidies to support these families separate from the federal programs? Could there be a different parallel program that we can sort of run and institute in parallel to sort of the federally subsidized programs that we currently have in the city? What are the other levels of support that we as a city and the state can pull together to actually support these families long term in the face of sort of this federal aggression? So those are some of the things that we can start thinking about now, just because that reality might very well come true in the next year or two.
Thank you, but we can avoid that reality if we vote.
Yes.
So just want to put that plug in. Vote. Tell other people to vote. Drive someone. Okay, so is there anyone out in the audience who would like to respond to this? Burning desire to just speak up, respond. Questions? Question.
Vernon desire to speak up. I would love support for the changing of their status. Here, they've been here 10 years, suffering under the same status. Now you come in and realize they're under this status. How come we're not working to change it?
So just in case, and for the camera, so the question is, they've been here 10 years, this family, under the same status. Why aren't we working to change the status? Let's have Jessica, as a different respondent, maybe respond to that.
Sorry, to clarify their immigration status? Okay. I mean, that is something that we could, ask them, are you interested in that? Put it back on them. What, have you already been working with different agencies for this? Alyssa mentioned before, are they already connected with different CBOs? They very well may be, and they might be actively pursuing this, and it's, taking a while. And I don't know all the timelines for that, but.
How do we support their efforts? I think is what he's saying.
That's the question. How do we support them? We got Bay Area Legal who can take care of the legal costs of the status change. We have Good Samaritan House who is funded to work on immigration change. And, why are we not connecting these people with these services?
I think, Mr. Hatter, you're right. I think part of what we're saying is we have to connect people to those services that are existing. So yes, let's everyone write those down if you don't know those places. But absolutely, I think, how do we support them doing that? We walk and take them to do it as much as we can. I think the other thing I heard in that is there also is a policy question around that. How easy is it for people's immigration status to change? Like Jason said, we did these OSHA, with the support of OSHA, these events specifically around immigration, where we brought the immigration lawyers to Sunnydale and to Potrero. And they did as many families as could be there, and we would hope that more families come. But they found that, a couple families, that really is an option for them. For most families, the way the immigration law is right now, it's not an option in terms of changing status. So we want to make sure that we're looking at all of those and really pushing for policy change around that.
And it looks like someone over, Leo, you had a response?
Right, thanks. I just want to add to your point that visa petitions for Central American countries take forever. So it may be that the kids started a petition for the parents, but it's 10, 12, 15 years away. That's why it doesn't really change. And then the other thing I wanted to add, which is just practical, use Dahlia. I mean, it's not the best case scenario to leave your community, but there are tax credit units at 30, 40, even 50% that are less than $1,400 for a tax credit 2-bedroom. That's another option out there. Thanks.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you. And is there any, and this is a question for me. There were 2 organizations thrown out there about jobs and housing. Is someone keeping a list of all of these available things for mixed status family or immigration status? And anyone? You're taking notes. Okay, so that might be something we're going to end up doing at Hope SF, so stay tuned. So I'm going to move on to the next. Well, oops, sorry, I didn't see you.
Okay, so I'm very nervous, but I had to say something. I think that the one thing that wasn't addressed, it's not the immigration status, it's their fear, right? And that's what keeping them paralyzed. So I think that someone working with them personally to deal with that fear, right? And then nobody addressed that the high schooler was talking about dropping out of school was going to repeat this. So I think those things need to be addressed before the other things can be addressed, because we can help people and they still stuck in that same state of mind. They pass it down and down and down.
So on that, is anyone have anything they want to add to how to help someone address their fear or help the high school student? Any? Okay, I keep hearing there's a lot, so
I know that Mayor Ed Lee had started a program called P500 for 500 families in the city. I was one of the recipients of that program, and it pretty much gave us a mentor from looking for housing all the way to getting a job, and she just kind of gave us a nudge of, go back and follow up, because it's my first time dealing with resources from the city and looking for assistance. So she was just there, met us wherever we were at a coffee shop, at our house, just making sure we're going to appointments and just saying, go back, reach out. I can help you with this. If I can, I'll drive you here to submit this application. So having that one-on-one help and hand-holding to go through the various organizations and the system is definitely a big helping hand. She's bilingual. She worked with a lot of people who were immigrants as well. So definitely having that one-on-one to guide them through these various organizations is definitely a big help. But I think Mayor Breed changed the program to Families Rising, where it's just focused on child development. So I think that's, if the other organizations involved can continue that guidance, would definitely be a good resource for them.
And thank you for sharing from your personal experience. So I'm going to keep moving so we could circle back, but let's get through the other scenarios. And okay, scenario number 2. The Fuchsia household resides in a dilapidated public housing for decades. Recently, they were relocated to newly constructed units. They fell behind in their rent payments without explanation. Property management continued to notice the household about rent being due by the 5th of each month. If property management did not receive payment for current and past rent due, property management would have no choice but to proceed with legal action. Services staff attempted to reach the household without success. The Fuchsia family promised they would make payments towards the balance owed, but payments never materialized ultimately. Ultimately, the Sheriff's Department was called to lock out the Fuchsia household from their unit because property management never received payment for the current and past rent. To mitigate the displacement of this household, Hope SF staff stepped in and paid the back rent amount. The household was asked to enter into a rent payee program, so this situation would not happen again. Unfortunately, the household did not get into the rent payee program and again found themselves in arrears, owing money for rent not paid. The household has since gone to other agencies providing rental support to get their rents paid. Okay, so this question is for Jeffrey. That's because he's our property management expert on the panel. Could property management have done something different?
Okay, so yeah, I'm very nervous, first of all, and hopefully you all can hear me. So, first off, I, as a property manager and that I've been in the business for as long as I have, I strive on, I made it my mission to let non-payment of rent be the last things tenant, resident, household gets evicted for. There are too many agencies out there that will assist the residents or a tenant or a single individual with securing the funds for the back rent or rent to be paid. However, it starts with the individual, the household members themselves, the drive to actually want to go out there and do the footwork. And so, creating that drive and letting the resident know that your housing is first and foremost when it comes to anything else. They tend to want to have other needs and put other things before just your basic rent and housing living situation. So again, when you say, what can property management do differently? Well, first off, I'm not gonna immediately, go to eviction. I want you to do some footwork. Let's see what services, agencies that are out there who can actually help with securing the funds for back rent. So as far as from a property management standpoint, I'm not going to evict you for that. I want you to get out there, do the footwork. Let's see, is your income not meeting the rent? Do we need to do an adjustment? What needs to be done in order for your rent and for the situation to not continue? In some cases, I would love, and I've been, hoping for mandated payees for households who are on fixed incomes. It sounds kind of, cruel and takes away independence, but we have too many households going to court for evictions and non-payment of rent. So to avoid that, if you're on a fixed income, it's maybe not a payee, money management, sounds better. So, have a money manager teaching the household to put their, priorities, the business, the main things first, and then double back and, have fun later, So, again, to work with them and before we go to eviction. And again, to create and give them some education and teach them. Maybe they don't know how to save. Maybe they need help saving, putting aside money weekly or every 2 weeks, depending on pay schedules and pay dates, to help them see that, okay, I can save money, pay my rent, and still have fun at the same time. So to just really work with the household or tenant.
So Jessica, I would like you to answer the same question. Could services have done something differently? And if so, what? Please be specific, though.
Yeah, so given the situation, it doesn't go in depth of how the services attempted to reach the household, and when it says without much success, not sure what that means. Yeah, but from my perspective, services should be notified immediately from property management once the household misses their rent payment. Oftentimes that doesn't happen. It's, a couple months later, and then it's, oh, this family needs help. Well, services didn't know that. So once services does know, reaching out to the household to try to get an answer as to what's going on, reaching out in multiple methods, whether calling, which oftentimes the resident has a new phone, their phone is shut off, their voicemail is full. Also, if texting is an ability for you, that's a great way as well. Email sometimes, as well as leaving a note on their door. Even ringing their doorbell, seeing if they're home, say, hey, I wanted to meet with you. Do you have some time soon? And if you are able to connect with them, get them in for a meeting. If they don't feel comfortable with property management, meet with them first, just services in the household or the resident. If they do feel comfortable with property management, bring them in, and so they're aware of what the situation is. Was there an emergency? Was their car impounded, or what other extra expenses did they have to put their rent money towards that month? And really just is trying to establish a relationship as much as possible with that household, I think is really key, to let them know that you care about them and care, we care why you're not paying your rent this month, what is going on, because services might be able to help you out with that as well. Yeah, I think, yeah.
And I have one more question just for property management, because I don't know. Because I thought that Jessica mentioning that as soon as the rent isn't paid to notify services, is that legal under property management? I don't know. Like, as soon as rent's missed, are you allowed to, as a property manager, to notify someone else?
Yes, I am allowed to. Yeah, there.
Okay, so someone in the audience is saying there's an agreement to allow for that. So, okay, I just didn't know. So, see, I'm good for answers. So I already know we have someone in the audience who wants to speak. So if you want to come on up, and we'll use that microphone on that side. This one now stretches, so if someone on this side wants to ask a question, please come up.
Hello, my name is Ray Kelly. I just wanted to make a comment. So sometimes when residents, they get in trouble, they get in tough situations, they're not even aware of these different programs and resources to even help them. So my question is, what are these programs and agencies, what are they doing to advertise and market and let these residents know that we are here? Because a lot of people that's in trouble, they don't even know where to reach out for help. So we need to figure out a strategy where they know we here. They know you there, so then when they get in trouble, they know who to call, they know who to reach out to, because a lot of times they don't know where to turn. So what are these agencies and programs doing to market themselves, to make themselves available and let the residents know that we are here? What's being done from that side?
So, Alyssa, just so Jessica doesn't have to repeat this question, could you answer that?
I think we need to do better. I'll start by saying that. The way that we do it at Shanti, one of the things we noticed about this is we started working with the residents way before there was that move. So everyone at the new building at 1101 has already been connected with a Shanti Navigator. So we supported them through the relocation process, and we've also supported a lot of those families who were in arrears prior to relocation to make sure that they were able to relocate. And so there is that relationship already built, which I think is it's a best practice thinking forward to the different phases. Like, how are we gonna do that? The other is, I think, really depending on our relationships, both with residents. Word of mouth is a big deal, because showing someone that, putting up a flyer, we find people will look at that, but then they're like, well, I don't know if I should trust you. Why should I come to you? So really making sure that residents who we have supported, if they know of people and say, hey, why don't you call somebody at Shanti? Our partners are very important to us. CARE is a very critical partner at Potrero. The Potrero Hill Tenants Associations and councils are very important. Health and Wellness, SFHA, Bay Legal. Anytime anyone hears every door is the right door, we want to make sure that everyone knows that, oh yeah, if they go anywhere, they'll know who to go to next. But we do need to do better, I think, figuring out ways to do it around text, making sure that all of this signage is really things that people actually can see. It's not all about words. We'll put a sign with a bunch of words on it, but how else can we do that? Do you have any suggestions for that, how we could do it better? Would love that. Or if other people have suggestions?
Yeah, anyone in the audience have suggestions on how to do it better? Come on up.
I say invest in the community stakeholders such as like the neighborhood house.
Come on up. You have to come up. So someone from the audience said invest in the community stakeholders, like residents, particularly residents, to help get the word out about opportunities for assistance with rent. Another comment? Come on up, please.
Good morning. My name is Eddie Kittrell, and I'm from Potrero Hill. Like what you're talking about, it's like I'm a leader in our community, but you have to lead by example. No offense to housing, but I got in trouble with housing, something that my daughter did, and they wouldn't accept my rent. It wasn't my fault. So I'm having my rent trying to pay them. What will I do? So they're not accepting my rent. So now, normally what you would do is you would say, oh, they don't accept my rent, I won't keep the money. So I had nobody I could turn to, but lucky I had a friend he's an attorney. And he said, save your money, man. And what we had to do was save our money. And when we finally got out, and they said, hey, I don't think you want no problem with those tenants. Leave them alone. And we came up with, that was over $5,000 we had to come up out of our pocket and pay to housing authority. We wouldn't not be evicted. So what you have to do is you have to be legal, be in your lease compliance. Always stay within your lease, because sometimes it's not your fault. They can find any little thing that's wrong with you. I don't know about these new people we're coming into, but you better stay in lease compliance. Take that from my word. Be conscious about your lease. Read that lease and follow it, because a lot of things can happen. It's not your fault. You'll be to blame for it. Thank you.
Just a follow up. So read your lease, and he said get legal support. And so there is Bay Area Legal Aid, and I guess also is HRCSF part of that support? Okay, HRC, Housing Rights Commission of San Francisco. So that's just it. Oh, one more thing.
So again, just to kind of piggyback off of what everyone said, you know, I hear a lot about education to educate the resident, again, about the different assistant programs that are out there for them, you know, and also too, just, you know, weekly housing retention meetings, you know, just to check in, you know, with one another and services to have them check in with the tenant to see, are they having any problems, or you know, what is it that you need help with, and you know, and also too, you know, what I've noticed is there's a lot of pride that tenants have when it comes to reporting income, you know, going from, you know, making good money to making little to none, and then having to report that, you know, it's kind of it's a state of mind where they want to make good on rent. You know, they want to make, you know, it's like, I can do it, but I'm ashamed to say anything about it, you know. And so just again, the support and you know, saying, hey, report your income, you know, it may be 6 months before you can do it again. So again, just these are different ways to just kind of help the household maintain housing before eviction. So, you know, just again, retention meetings, check in with one another, check in with the household, you know, do as much as you can do to try to keep the household housed. Again, that's my mission.
Audience member, thanks.
Hi, my name is Juanetta, and I just wanted to piggyback on the scenario. So when a family starts to not paying their rent, you got to find out what is causing that. You know, what is going on with the family that they can't pay their rent. So one of the services that Hope SF/property management can do is like a risk assessment. Definitely before you start throwing out money to help them financially, because at some point you got to make them be accountable. They need, if I had anything to do with it, they would sign a contract, and it would be a mandatory 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that the family would need to do in order to receive this help with the back rent. And, you know, once they, you know, get into a position where they can't comply, you know, you review the situation again, but at some point, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do, because there are other families that could really benefit from the money. You know, you got to try to find a way to get the families to be accountable. If they need help, if there's substance abuse involved, you get them some help and make them follow through with whatever programs that they have to do. Or it's just, it's not, or else it's not going to work. You know, you have to start holding tenants accountable, but also provide some righteous services to help them. And I know that because I'm a landlord, and you know, so, and I try my best to refer to a lot of stuff, you know. So, you know, things happen. You have to find out what's going on with the family that's causing them to not pay their rent.
Thank you. Okay, we have another person. Sorry. No, you can't.
Hi, everybody. So, as a person who fell onto hard times from using drugs and got behind in my rent and then came back forward and paying my rent now, I found that a lot of people don't understand, myself included, was that, oh, I can make it up next month. Now, my first thing in my mind is, okay, my rent's paid. I'll figure out how to pay everything else later. Even some of my neighbors, they will give me their money order. If the office is closed on a Friday, they will give me their money order to hold on to for them so that they can make sure their rent is paid on that Monday. And so putting those steps into place. You have a lot of people who are on drugs, alcohol, and then when they get off of it, they still haven't learned how to pay what they owe. And so we have to be conscious of being able to help people with their baby steps. A lot of people are very embarrassed to say that they don't know how. A lot of people don't know how to read. They make you think they know how to read, and they're signing all those forms, and they don't have a clue what they're signing. A lot of people do not know how to read that live in Potrero, that are in the housing office signing leases. They don't know what they're signing. A lot of people don't read English as well. And so when they get this notice, and it's only in English, and if their kid is not translating it correctly, because now they look for their child to translate it, but the child sees that they're about to get evicted, but they don't want their parent to start feeling bad, so they think they're helping by not translating it right. So you have so many different scenarios. Yes, people do need to be held accountable, but sometimes people have to relearn of how to be held accountable. I had to relearn on how to be held accountable to get it in my brain that, oh, pay your rent, and it's a lot, because the first time my rent went up, I cried like a baby. I'll kid you not, but it's a high, but you look at it, and then people's mentality of, and I'm gonna be honest, why am I paying this high rent? But the people who's living in this vacant unit keeping me up all damn night long, and they're not paying anything, but they're still there. And so there's all these different scenarios that feed into it. Because I know I have a hard time, because I got to walk. I ain't going to tell you how much I got to walk into that office next month. But I got to walk it in because it's cold outside. But a lot of people look at that as they just don't know. So there's a lot of different things and a lot of different agencies that can come together. And then when you pay somebody's rent, you got to follow through and make sure that they don't give up their unit or that they don't fall back into it, because, and then you got to understand, some agency won't even pay you back rent because you live in public housing. And then the ones that do pay it, some of them pick and choose, and they send you through so many hoops and loops and dupes and dumps that by the time you're on the street. So there's a lot that you're in these offices, but those of us on the ground, we see and we know. And back to the missed status families, there are a lot of families that are really hurting. Some of them are my neighbors. And a lot of times they don't utilize services because they're scared. They're like, you can tell them this, but then they see what happens to their family. And so they're like, one of my neighbors, her husband got deported, right? So why does she want to trust anybody? So there you go.
Thank you. Okay. One thing to add, but thank you for sharing your personal experience. And after Alyssa shares, we'll move on to the next scenario.
I'll do this really quickly. I think the other thing that we're missing is being creative. We're always talking about paying back rent. And one of the things that we had suggested, and I'm hoping we can still brainstorm, is how do we help people pay forward? Is that an option? Because the past is done. How can we say, hey, maybe we can support you in the months forward and forgive some back rent? I'm just going to put that out there. But it's hard. It's a journey. It took people decades, generations to get where they are today, and we want to start looking forward.
Thank you for that. And there'll be other opportunities to keep talking about these things and come up with creative ideas and share them at the lunch discussion afterwards. So hopefully that'll generate some more. And we have one other burning question. So come to the front, Kathy.
Okay, sometimes what we have found is when people pay their back rent, or they're paying their current rent and they owe their back rent, the property manager is taking that money and applying it to their back rent when the person thinks it's being current. So you actually have to explain you're paying this rent for this month even though you owe the back rent, because people are not clear about that.
Property managers, I'd like to hear if anyone clarifies that. Yes? Yes? Okay. Keep moving then. Okay, scenario 3. Mrs. Gold had a difficult childhood, and as she transitioned into adulthood, she struggled with academics and maintaining consistent employment. In her late 20s, she grew tired of temporary low-paying work options and decided to enroll in classes to become a medical technician. She successfully completed her coursework and is employed in an entry-level job. She recently was effective in applying for and obtaining affordable housing in a newly developed Hope SF site. She enjoys where she lives, participates in community activities, and is current in her rental payments. Last month, she was in a horrible accident that has left her on medical disability assistance of $1,235 per month. Her rent is $1,100 per month, and now she has fallen behind in her rent payments. So I'm going to go to you, Jeffrey, again, because it's kind of property management related. Considering your role in the organization, how could you help to support Mrs. Gold?
Okay, so, again, one of the things to consider would be, again, she's just been in an accident. I'm looking at the fact that she has history with Hope SF, and so again, thinking about my own mission, my own drive, what drives me, I couldn't see myself evicting or even going legal, considering that she's been on time. She's just gone through a tragedy in her life. So to add another tragedy on top of what she's already gone through, me personally, I would feel bad. So again, for me, I'm looking at, well, what options does she have out there? What can we help her do? From a property management standpoint, I also think outside of the box. What is it that she's getting every month? How can I, what type of, again, and seek higher help from my supervisor to say, what are our options to help this person in this situation? Is there a way that her rent can be adjusted? And if not, what can we do? Well, how much is she behind? What type of payment plan are we able to put her on to help her get through the situation? Because she's not going to stay, disabled forever. She will eventually get back on her feet and will be able to begin to pay rent. So why not help her? Let's help her maintain her housing through her situation, and then encourage her, because again, there may be something inside of her that says, I want to give up. I can't do this. So to support her in the drive and let her know that the situation is going to be okay, and just to continue. If we're on a payment plan, let's make sure we stick to that payment plan. Let's make sure we continue to work with property management. Let's make sure we continue. And again, I'm thinking from working with services to make sure that we're doing jointly together what we can to help keep the person housed. So again, she wouldn't be evicted in this situation. We would definitely work with her until her situation was resolved.
So, Alyssa, would you answer that question and be specific about what you would do as a service provider?
Yeah, one of the things, let me see. Yes, she's such a resilient woman from the beginning. She has all this skill set. So I would definitely want to know, asking you, is there any sense of income adjustment? So that's just, if we can just start with that, I think that would be critical. Definitely thinking about connecting her with Bay Legal. I'm just curious about if her story had to do with an accident, is she getting compensated for that? Was it a workplace accident? What was going on just specifically around the accident? Is she able to apply to SSI to do concurrent payments with SSDI? Is there any way to increase her income around that? She was a medical technician, so really wondering what other resources that she had at her workplace. This is a tricky one, depending on if housing is really, if the property management is able to help with the rent, that's great, but really talking with her about, is this a long-term situation or not? I think you said we're assuming it's not, but I think that's one thing that we want to be sure about is what is the situation? If it's short-term, great. I think those are perfect. If it's longer term, then are there things that we need to look at in terms of other housing that she can afford? Which would be, I think, complicated around that. Did I miss something? Anybody out there?
So Jason, it looks like you have you want to answer this, so I'm gonna let you. You're looking like you might have something to say.
No, I was just agreeing with everything that's been said so far. I would also add in possible workforce development as well, just to sort of assess like what is the length of the disability, if it's temporary, if it's long term, even with disability. Are you able? Do you have a desire to also work in some other position? Like, so workforce development can be very useful in sort of transitioning into a new workforce industry or position as well, if there is the desire and ability there for that. I was going to add in getting some sort of shallow subsidy in as well, short-term or long-term, to sort of maintain that housing, to maintain her place in that community as well. But to Alyssa's point, if it is a longer-term type of issue, looking down the line, like, is supportive housing needed? Is some sort of other subsidized supportive housing in the community available? If not, is that something that we should also consider as well, to sort of keep that person, maintain their connections to that community without sort of dislocating them out of that area?
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone burning question? Come up and.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Frey, and one of the issues that I have noticed in all three scenarios so far is the fact that there's a lot of healing that needs to occur here. There's a lot of adverse childhood experiences and complex traumas that are affecting every single one of these households. We definitely have a need for resources. We have resource services, but to create an abundance of resource connections, whether it's a list, whether it's, like Alyssa said, having residents talk to each other about what works for them. I think each Hope SF property, through my own experience, has its own culture and its own way of presenting themselves and getting to people's needs, like Jeffrey had talked about. A lot of people have a lot of pride, and it's instilled in them in a young age, and a lot of it is because they have overcome so much in their life. So it becomes difficult, like in this situation where you've gone through so much, you've overcome it all, and now you need help. So there are some programs that I'm familiar with, like nationwide. The average American can't access $500 in an emergency. And we do have here the Earn Savers program that a lot of residents either not are aware of or underutilizing. They also have their K through 12 program for college savings. And we also have, I think specific to each Hope SF program, we have the Smart Balance coaching that prepares families for such emergencies and also helps them building with their credit. So I think we really need to start being a little bit more creative and acknowledge the healing that has to happen and the new habits. It takes 30 days at least to get a new habit and 30 more days to keep that habit. So us being able to think and stay mindful that this time is needed for these families instead of kind of just jumping to, oh, they just don't care and there's no need for them to have housing. Everybody needs to stay housed, and I know we have a really huge crisis here in San Francisco, so I believe the more we look into our resources and the more we connect our resources with each other instead of being very competitive as it is in this city, the more prosperous it'll be for our residents to be able to heal and have more comfort in their own homes.
Thank you.
Hey. So this scenario actually kind of happened to me. I didn't get injured, but I actually lost my job, and I was terrified that I was gonna also lose my apartment. But thankfully, property management actually told me that they were gonna work with me, and that, well, unfortunately, there wasn't like a payment plan that I could join. And I'm assuming that in this scenario, it's a tax credit unit, right? I'm not sure, but let's just say that's my scenario. And actually, I was referred to Hamilton Families. I'm not quite sure what the name is. They actually provide a 12 to 18 month subsidy where they'll pay your rent as you're getting a new job. So that works too. But unfortunately, I didn't need to use it. I ended up getting a job within like the next 2 weeks, and I was able to stay housed. But that is a resource in case you guys want to write that down.
Hi, I was going to say if it's a project-based unit, you should immediately have services help to renegotiate the rent, because roughly it would go down to like $360 a month from the $1,100. And the other thing is, as Jeffrey was mentioning, we can wait, and I'm glad you said that, because here there's a nexus of basically a reasonable accommodation. You had an accident, so fix your rent, lower your rent. If you got behind that month or the second month, then we'll just do a payment plan until you catch up. And hopefully that's a good start.
Thank you. I just want to say that Leo's a property management professional too, so that's another property management voice you just heard.
One other resource that I refer as a receptionist at the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development is DAS, the Department of Aging and Adult Services, offer in-home supportive services. A lot of people, if it's an accident, if they're going through cancer treatment, they're on meds, they can't think about rent and taking care of that stuff. So it's really nice that property management can be flexible with time and allowing time for healing. So definitely getting some kind of in-home care aid to kind of help them manage all the other things that are going on.
You have another question, come on up.
Hey everybody, I'm Dante, and I work at everybody. I work at Alice Griffith as the community health and wellness coordinator. So one thing that I love about Ms. Gold, regardless if she is in a very, I'd say, unfortunate incident, is that she shows a lot of resilience, you know, with her upbringing. And she knows how to tap into her resources. Actually has a lot of successes. So just being, knowing that she is already connected in community activities. So I'd assume she has a big network, right, of folks on site who'd be willing to support her, and also be wondering like, why isn't Mrs. Gold around? So I think just utilizing that connection, and for people on site and on the ground to use a strength-based approach and really tap in with her and remind her that she has been through so much, and to really utilizes her internal resources that she has, as we on site are her external resources. So.
Suleiman.
Hey, what's up, everybody? What's good? So my apologies if it sounds a little scattered. I just had this thought, and it was a burning thought, so I wanted to make sure I expressed it with the utmost of intention. So being a organizer among a sea of service providers, my thought process among things seemed to actually be a little bit different. And one of the things I wanted to bring up, which I feel and I perceive to actually be a very important thing, is the thing that I've seen, or at least lacking, which is the relationship and the community that this person is surrounded by or not surrounded by. So typically speaking, when we actually have tragedy or some sort of incident in our lives, we tend to immediately rely on the people who are closest to us. But if that community has been fractured, and especially generationally fractured, and has undergone subjugation and still undergoes subjugation, then the ability to connect to the things that are in close relationship to us to provide those supports don't actually happen. And I know as of right now, we've actually spoken on many things that are wonderful in terms of providing services, but the thing that actually provides the most direct service is the relationship that we have with each other in community. That actually provides the most direct thing that we often rely upon. And when that is broken, then we're kind of left floundering. And there is a whole host of things, a myriad of things that actually happens when that community is broken. So if we're focusing and targeting a community that has actually gone through numerous fractures and is continually going through fractures and displacement, I would propose, or at least love to see, a greater thought process around how actually community repair is being done and not necessarily pushing towards like a service direction. I do feel that services are important, but I do want to actually say, and I'm not going to say community empowerment because empowerment is a very white supremacist type concept. You can't empower anybody. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But community self-determination, I feel, is actually the right terminology to use. And if we're actually going to be looking at community self-determination, I'd like to see more rhetoric or more language, more thought process, more dialogue, more resources put into that way of thinking. I'll end with that right there.
Thank you. Come on, sir.
Hello, everybody. My name is Yul, and I am hearing a lot. And one of the things that we hear a lot about is new housing being built and affordable housing being built. But what we don't hear about is retention of people and long-term residents of San Francisco. People are being forced out. There's no sense of community anymore. I completely concur with the previous speaker that there's no sense of community. And so until we get some kind of repair in our communities, nobody's going to be trusting of anybody. And in this last scenario, I heard something said about possibly moving the tenant to another, maybe more affordable place to live. And I would just suggest to you that any kind of disruption at this point, she's already disabled. I mean, how is she going to move? Are you going to supply movers for her? I mean, that would be more disruptive than what she's already going through. I don't think that's a viable option. I also think that earlier detection for residents who fall behind would be something that should be invested in. Because if they fall behind, somebody should be tracking that. And then you don't have this big arrears that they have to try to overcome. I mean, we have to stay connected. There's a lot of things that can cause people to fall behind on rent. Things happen, but at the same time, we need to be vigilant in trying to track this and make sure it doesn't continue. Find out, Juanetta said that, we need to find out what the root of the issue is. If they're just not paying rent because, if there's a drug problem, then we have, places for them to get help if they want it. But just putting blood in the game, just doing the leg work, that's great. But people will just, they'll just fall behind and just do the leg work to get caught up. But we're not fixing the root of the problem. So I think if we put, for lack of a better term, the rat on the table, this community is hurting. Many people have been displaced and continue to be displaced. Let's just say that, people are just being put out. And until that is dealt with, and still we need to deal with some retention of people that have been here. We got to look at it. Look, they've been here for 20 years. We're displacing them. And it's all about greed. It's not about, what somebody can afford. It's about greed because the carrot keeps moving. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. I know this person, PJ.
Hi, everyone. So I want to say that, I agree that, a lot of healing needs to go on within communities, but I think the biggest part is communication. Services with the resident, services with property management. If everyone is, on the same page and has an understanding of certain situations that residents are going through, things could be done. If people are being evicted within these communities, these Hope SF sites, services need to be checking their staff and checking their organizations and asking them what is it that they're doing wrong that are not helping these people from being not being evicted. So yes, healing needs to go on, but communication within services, service providers, CBOs, with each other and with property management is, I think, what can help as well. So,
Thank you. I have more questions, but I'm going to keep it moving, and then maybe we just have open dialogue at the end. So, and I also want to say here and now that for those of you who share your personal stories, it's gratefully appreciated. So early, thank you for doing that. So, scenario 4. The Purple household recently relocated to a newly constructed unit. They are active in the community, enjoy living in Hunters View, and seeing the positive changes around them. The Purple family's head of household has regular and steady employment. The Purple household makes timely rent payments and has attended financial coaching workshops for months to help build their credit, history, and savings. They want to become homeowners in their community and hope to purchase a unit in the housing being developed in a future Hope SF phase. So I'm going to start with Jessica on this one. Considering your role in your organization, how can you help support the Purple household to fulfill their dream of homeownership?
Yeah, so I think I would start off by honestly congratulating them for all the hard work they've done so far. I mean, the fact that they have regular and steady employment, their rent is timely. They've attended financial coaching workshops. They've worked on their credit history and their savings. Those are all things that I would have recommended from the beginning. So I think this is really commendable, and for them to know that and be proud of that. I don't know too much about the Hope SF homeownership programs, so I would actually connect with someone from Hope SF and then connect this household as well to get them more information on what eligibility looks like, timelines when those are actually going to be ready, if that's something realistic for the family. And mention to them as well, if they're interested in the city's BMR homeownership program, that there are resources for that as well, that they would have to go through the city to take the home buyer education courses, and that there are help through the city with their down payment assistance. Those are options for them as well. But overall, my approach would be to continue to meet with them, to have them check in with me, as much as possible, see what issues or obstacles come up for them that I can further help them with, whether that's just researching or connecting to my own colleagues, and just really, kind of being, honestly, I feel like their cheerleader in the back with this, because that's a huge step, and it is really wonderful, and we want to support them as much as possible.
Thank you. And Jason, I'm going to ask you what could, well, now I forgot the question, but considering your role, how could you help provide support to this family?
Yeah, I almost feel like this is a Cindy question to help answer as well. But in terms of my role, just following up on everything that was already said already, it could be a matter of thinking about how can, there's the city's down payment support system as well. How can we expand this? How can we target this to our communities in Hope SF? Is there a way to sort of look at these huge projects and see, is there any way to build in more BMR units, below market rate units into these properties without sort of negatively affecting the health of the project itself? Is there a way to, even for the market rate units or the market rate properties, is there a way to sort of work with developers to sort of even keep market rate affordable, which in this town could be $800K, $900K. But are these steps that we can sort of take as a city to sort of make these scenarios more viable for families who are looking to actually buy property in the communities that they sort of live in and grew up in. So those are sort of the steps that we can sort of take as a city as well.
And it looks like Elizabeth or someone from SFHA, because I am curious about the family self-sufficiency program, but I can't speak to it.
So I'm Elizabeth with the San Francisco Housing Authority and the Mayor's Office of Housing. So the FSS program is the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. It's a program that's supported through HUD, and it helps the families build up a savings so that they can use those funds, whether it be for a down payment on a home or other goals that they have. And it's provided, and if they're in good standing, whether they live in public housing or under Section 8, they are eligible. So they can reach out to their worker in order to figure out how to apply for that program.
So just stay there. So just
I'm
to
not
be
an
clear,
expert on it, but
I know. But just to be clear, so if you have a project-based voucher, whether at a property or not, you can call your eligibility worker or go through this new system and try to get on the list. Is there any? And I wonder if there's any limits on the list. So people are saying there's limits on the list. But I guess this is an issue that the city can work on to make the no limits or a wait list. Is there something like that? I don't know.
The limits, I mean, when you say limits, it's you can apply. And the thing is that there are requirements to it, right? You have to, once you start off in the program, you start off with a base. That's how much you're making at the time. And one of the things is that it's there to help you get more employment or more financial gain, and then that is calculated into how the savings works. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but it's not that anyone can't apply. Okay. So there's not a restriction on that. And as long as you live in subsidized housing, whether that be a voucher, a project-based voucher, a housing choice voucher, or in public housing or a RAD site, you are eligible as long as you you meet the eligibility requirements. And again, it's there to help you get, more financial wealth, and you build up on that wealth, and that goes into the savings account.
Elizabeth, when you say ask your worker, because I've asked about this program before and they said that it's not for public housing, who do we actually go to actually apply then at this point? Or who do we talk to about this specific?
Please go to the Egbert office to get more information, okay?
Hi again. I wanted to say a good resource is also MEDA. It's on, I think, 19th and Mission. They have a first-time home ownership program, so they'll assist with down payment on a home. They also help the families assess their savings or whatever they have to see if they're ready for mortgage payments. And yeah, that's a really good resource as well. And they offer it in Spanish and English. I don't know if they have any other languages, but hey. It's MEDA, M-E-D-A.
They stand for Mission Economic Development Association. And there are a few other down payment assistance programs in the city. I think MoCD has a list of where those down payment, I'm looking at a few MoCD, Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. And Homeownership SF does too. So there's a resource at the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development with all the down payment assistance programs in the city.
Hi, Malik Looper, Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. Okay, I'm just hanging out with you. Okay, so yes, we do have the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development. We do have resources for people who are interested in home ownership. There's a 6-hour homebuyer workshop. One entry point can be Homeownership SF, but we also fund 5 other housing counseling organizations. And for the purple household, I would encourage them to go down to 3rd Street, because that's close by, to the San Francisco Housing Development Corporation, where they can do their for an entry point for kind of assessment, orientation, and then have them connect to the nearest, in terms of the calendar, the first of a 6-hour home buyer workshop.
Yeah, that's a great resource. Thank you. Now our question.
So I was just wondering, because back, I'm 61. I'm 61. So back in the day where I needed help financially and had to apply for welfare and all, that they really scrutinized your bank accounts and everything. So back into this time, current time, are families really able to save up money without being dinged, without their rent going out?
So we have a personal experience.
So, and it's crazy because I found out about the FSS program when I was at the conference in North Carolina. And then I came back and Mariah, we was in a meeting, and then she's like, boom, here you go. And she gave me Anika's card. So Anika, so I signed up for the FSS program. So here it goes. You go to the orientation, then you fill out the paperwork. Depending on your household size, determines on if you're able to get into the program. Once you get into the program, there's your base of what your rent is. Then then they work out of what your goals are. Like my goal was to get my master's, to increase my employment, and so forth and so on. And so if your rent is $1,000, and you're in the program, and your rent's at $1,000, when then your rent goes up to $2,000. So you pay your $2,000 rent. That $1,000 that your rent went up is what goes into the savings account for you. Now, you have to stay in the program for the minimum of 3 years, and it's a little give and take on, but the minimum is 3 years, up to 5 years. Mm-hmm. Once you completed your goals and stuff, you take that money. You are not penalized with that money. You can do whatever you want with their money. Now, here's the clincher. If you decide to get you or buy you a house, the FSS program will help you pay your mortgage for 15 years. Here's the clincher. You cannot be in the public housing part and get that. But as you are moving over into the new buildings, like if you moved into the 1101 and you're on the FSS program, then you decide to get a house, now you qualify to be able to get help with your rent, your mortgage for up to 15 years. And then they come back to you at about year 12, year 13 and say, all right, you only got a couple more years and then we're not going to be helping you pay for this. And so then you work out that plan of how you're going to be able to maintain your mortgage after that 15 years is up. But you are not penalized for that money. It's saved for you. Also, but now if you get evicted or if you drop out of the program, no, you don't get that money. That money just goes back to housing, whatever. You don't get that money because it's technically not your money until you have reached all your goals and so forth and so on. But that's the gist of the FSS program. I don't know if Anika is Anika. No. She's not there no more. I gotta find out who to call now.
That's why I recommend that you go to Egbert. Like
Right.
anyone that's interested in the program can go down to the main office at 1815 Egbert and talk to the staff there.
And just, again, that's FSS, Family Self-Sufficiency Program. And you go to Egbert, the Housing Authority's office, and another person. And again, it's for Section 8, and it sounds like you can no longer be a public housing.
No. You can be a public housing resident when you sign up. The part that you cannot be a public housing resident is when you buy your house and you get to help you pay your mortgage for 15 years.
Okay. So when you can be a public housing resident, but once you want help with paying your mortgage, it's better to be in these new units, which are tax credit, ownership with equity. It's better to be in those types.
Wait, now left out one more important thing, one part. When you move over to the new unit, you have to be in that new unit for 1 year.
And you have to be in the new unit for 1 year before they help you pay the mortgage. Okay, go Rose.
You ready now? Okay, I'm ready. So I'm from Huntersview. My name is Rosemary Sims. I am now a program coordinator. I live and work in my own community. This purple family sounds like me, but I'm not. It kind of laughed at that. But I took 6 head of households down to a FSS meeting at San Francisco Housing Authority, like a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer. I didn't qualify. even though I'm housing, I'm from a legacy family because of my income. So your income, you can't make over like 20-something dollars an hour. That's what I was told. So I just wanted to let that be known, yeah. There's some, and then I also brought PJ, well, somebody's mother with me, and sorry, PJ, and a couple other people who are on a fixed income with SSI, right? And they don't qualify either. So unfortunately, no one I brought from Hunter's View was eligible. So yeah, so I just want, but because of income and whether or not you're working or not.
So that's just something as a goal that Hope SF can work on. Yeah. So now we have a Hope SF, I'm going to say expert, who can also talk about this.
I'm actually good morning. My name is Saida Letstufo, and I serve as the Director of Economic Advancement for Hope SF. I'm not going to talk about the details of FSS or the home ownership program that Uziri was talking about. There are some slight changes in what you said, definitely could be a benefit. What I do want to uplift, though, is the psychology around home ownership and understanding what this household, what their goal is with home ownership. Is it to build wealth? Is it for a tax write-off? Is it to have something to call their own? Because there's a whole host of things that comes with home ownership. And I'm just going to give all of y'all in this room a tad bit of free game that the key to building wealth is building wealth on money that is not your own. Right. So there are so many resources in San Francisco where you have the opportunity to build wealth on money that is not your own, which is what wealthy people do. Wealthy people get wealthy on our money, on capitalism, on consumerism, right? And so I'm just going to keep that high level there so that we all know there is so much free money. And having a mother who successfully navigated the MOCD home ownership program, the one where you don't have to pay the down payment back. Let's be clear, because there are two different tracks, one where you have to pay the down payment back and one where you don't, where she did that route. So she is now building her wealth on the track where she's earning equity, because there's a track where you don't earn equity, and equity is wealth. So it's about knowing where to access free money and how that money works for you and how that can contribute to your wealth portfolio. And so that is for another seminar, but I just want to put that out there, right? So that folks know, right?
And thank you, Saida, and another seminar. But just another thing to add for developers and for you guys, is anyone aware of what's called an individual, I wrote it down. So let me say individual development account, so basically these are accounts that can be set up at banks where people who are low income, and I don't know the definition that the banks are using, can create a savings account and then kind of match your money. And there are developers who sometimes work with banks and set up these accounts, and there are grants out there that will match that, but then the person may have to bank at that bank. But I do know of programs in the past that were like that member banks of the Federal Home Loan Bank would set up these individual accounts, and then people at properties could access that to do somewhat essentially like the FSS program. So that was it. I'm not sure if it was more toward, I think the individual IDA, individual development accounts, were probably for people in tax credit units without any rental subsidy, but I'm not sure. But that's something to look into, and it could also be an idea to do a large IDA for Hope SF properties. So anyway, it's an idea, something else on the table. So we have about 3 minutes left. Does anyone have a burning question on anything we've talked about?
We got to look at the history of the projects, right, and how it started, right? Even the history of this country, and look at people's mental health, that how it impacted people's mental health, right? And then engaging, like working with drug users and homeless people, is all about feelings, right? They're not going to remember what I helped them with. They're not going to remember what I said. They're going to remember how I made them feel, right? And so we have people that goes to these providers and they get treated bad. And so those of us that are in this for, to help people, we get a bad name. It's like little keywords that you can use. Like, I wouldn't want nobody calling me a drug abuser or a drug addict, right? It's the way we talk to people, and it's about how we make people feel. If I make, if a homeless person come to me, or a drug user come to me, or somebody comes to me, because people don't have low self-esteem coming from these areas, they have no self-esteem, right? And they leave me feeling good, they're gonna come back. And they're gonna come back. And they're gonna come back, right? And then I can make an impact, right? So it's about how we make people feel. If I'm having a bad day and I come to work, I look at it as I'm stepping on stage, right? And people's lives can be impacted, and I can help save a life just by how I make them feel when they walk away from me. But I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say something to the gentleman who said, oh, I've been hearing, there was something said that was about having someone move away. And I would like to own that I think I breathed that into the room when I said something. So I'd like to ask for forgiveness for even mentioning that. I think that there's a sense of, oh, when we're stuck, like, what do we do next? And we think in these ways, which is like, oh, well, I guess there's nothing left. So I just want to say I apologize for saying that I am completely aligned, and I hope we all are in this room to say, whatever's happening right now with Hope SF in these developments, the key is no one moves. It's for everybody who lives there now, should be there forever. Everyone who moves in, it's for them. So I just want to ask forgiveness for that, because I think I did that.
Another burning comment from the audience.
Hey everybody, Dante again. So my question is, honoring what Hope SF stands for is to make sure that families that have been here stay here, right? But with the execution of Hope SF, I could say from my vantage point that there was a lack of informing families, moving into the new phases, new buildings, of new rules, which could, open up a huge risk, right, of possible, losing housing or becoming displaced because of evacuation or too many delinquencies or whatever. So my question is, what's being done, for the sites and new phases of families that are moving over, learning from the past? And also, what can we do as a collaborative between service providers and property management, to do some damage control? Because at the end of the day, if folks, aren't understanding the rules, and if we are going to become mixed income communities, we got these new folks who are paying a lot of money, but at the end of the day, someone's still slapping their music really loud all throughout the night, and they're reporting it every day. That family, is probably going to get kicked out. So what is being done in terms of just figuring out how we could prevent situations like this? Because at the end of the day, that I see that could be a huge hole that if we don't fill now, is going to eventually have families displaced.
So Jason, and then I think also Jeffrey is property management, if you can answer that too.
Yeah, no, that's very real, and that's a very real threat as well. Like a lot of these house rules that are in place at some of the new properties, they're not all that different than the previous house rules that were in place at Housing Authority. The execution and sort of use of these house rules is a little bit different though. And that is a very real threat. So, I know property management goes through the trouble of actually sitting down with every single household and going through the lease and the house rules with every single family to make sure that they understand. And that's a very good first step. But in terms of sort of long-term support, how do you support this family that was living under a different set of rules and now have to live with a brand new set of rules? And how do you sort of help them through that transition? That is, a very good question. And that's something that, services is sort of a part of that conversation as well. Property management is part of that conversation as well. And how do you sort of operate in a non-punitive manner where we don't put folks' housing at risk in sort of executing these house rules? So, at least for my position, what I see my role in doing is sort of providing alternative tool sets to eviction and sort of enforcing and sort of following through with these house rules. How can we engage with households in a non-punitive manner to sort of not have them play super loud music at 3 o'clock in the morning? Because, if I was their neighbor, I'd probably hate it too. But how do you sort of approach that situation in a non-punitive manner that would put their housing at risk? And sort of providing property management services and attendant tools in which to sort of deal with that in a mediated manner, in a sort of trauma-informed manner. What are the tool sets that we have available through the city and through our services that can sort of provide that? I think a much larger question, and something that's going on right now, is the rules themselves and formation of these rules themselves. For a lot of properties, the rules were just sort of adopted without a lot of resident input. How do we sort of change that process where residents do actually have a say in the rules that govern their community? And I think that's a very large question. It's something that we're working through at some of the newer sites right now. What is a process? What is the process design and structure in sort of getting residents engaged in the formation of these rules and getting them to sit down with management, with the owners, to sort of come to a mutually agreed upon set of rules that everyone can sort of abide by? I know that Potrero is working through that process right now. Hopefully we can sort of work through that process at the other sites as well. But I think that is a much larger question, how do you get sort of tenants to the table and actually creating the rules that govern their community?
Okay, so from a property management standpoint, I'm just gonna give you firsthand experience with what I've been at Potrero Hill. And that's the stigma that the environment themselves has created about, property management's coming in to evict everybody. And again, that's not the case. We're not here to evict you because of the noise that you made. Right now we're looking at people who aren't used to having a neighbor above them, and it's what can I do? They're making a lot of noise. They don't understand the basic movement. Your normal, you get up in the morning, some people put their feet on the floor very hard and heavy. In some cases, people aren't looking at the fact that you made a whole lot of noise before we moved here. Now you kind of reaping what you sowed. So there's a lot of, what do we do? Well, no, we have to teach and educate people. No, you've never lived in an apartment building, and for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you didn't have anybody above you, so you don't know what it sounds like when somebody get up in the morning. You don't know what it sounds like when they walk through and they got high heels on. Some people understand, and kids, it's like teaching and teaching people who went from an outside living, so to speak, living where you walk from your front door directly outside. You're not still in the building. So again, you're now taking people who are 20, 30 years living outside, so to speak, now indoor living. How do you function? I can't just throw my stuff on the grass. I can't just throw trash on the floor anymore. I have to be mindful that there's a trash can. I'm indoors now, And again, to think that I'm going to evict you for noise. Again, educating people that there is a noise ordinance, letting them know there is such thing as over and beyond the normal. If it's a domestic violence situation, say something. If it, call the police, But if it's just a normal, if you're making just as much noise as I'm making, I shouldn't even be complaining. If I hear you, you hear me, we should be able to come to some sort of agreement. If tenants can't talk to one another respectfully about the noise level that's being made, because I'm hearing about noises above, but at the same time also trying to teach, within reason, how to talk to one another. You don't just go up and with a chip on your shoulder saying, hey, can you cut it out making all that noise? No, it's just a level of respect people have to have for one another. And I think that's what's going on in Potrero Hill. There is a level of respect. There's a level of understanding, about situations. And for instance, noise, it's going to take some getting used to, but it over time, it will definitely develop.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. So first of all, for Hunter's View, I like to say, I have a few things to say. The first thing is that I grew up in the community. I knew that there was people suffering because I was one of those individuals. My family, there's like 10 households in Hunter's View that are my family, and I knew that we were all suffering. So if I was suffering, I knew that we had to get on the front end when it came to changing our mindset around household rules. I was lucky to have colleagues that were amazing, that felt the same way as I did. So at least a year and a half or more before we even transitioned, while working with residents and collecting documents, we started holding these workshops around the psychology of moving, having workshops just on house rules, right? How do you feel about that? And some people were really, outraged. And I was like, did you know that these were the same house rules that we had in housing? So I think people just need time to recognize, right, and understand that we do need accountability. We have to be accountable for our actions, not just the people that work with us, but the people we work with and the people that live in these communities. I think it's important. I think a lot of it is we forget that these communities have really been, for multiple generations, lied to, traumatized. They were isolated. I'm telling you, I grew up on candy house food. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? We grew up out of fear we'd get shot. So I think that a lot of this we forget. Like, we're dealing with people that have really, really suffered, have watched loved ones get shot, multiple bullets. I can go on. I can make it real medieval in here, but it's the truth. And this needs to be dealt with. These individuals are amazing people. They just have been hurt. Because I'm an amazing person. You know what I mean? So it takes time to overthink you, but I'm not doing it. It just takes time to overcome these things. Because a lot of times we have issues, even working with each other. We have to overcome that. But it takes time. It's not going to happen in 4 or 5 years. Or, it took 40 years, 50 years to get here, 100 years. My family dealt with redlining. We've always worked. But when you're stamped down for years and years and years, you forget how to interact with each other, to communicate, to love one another. And I'm telling you, it's all about how we treat people. And I knew that going in, and I lead. I don't just say, okay, we're going to go, you guys go do outreach. No, I'm going to lead from the front. And that's what we all need to start doing. We want change, we got to lead from the front. Thank you so much.
Okay, Suleiman, and you'll be our last person. And then that'll be it. And then we'll talk about that.
Since I didn't see my dad come up, I figured I'd talk on your behalf, you know what I'm saying? That's an inside joke, by the way. We have no blood relationship. So I want to thank the brother over there, first and foremost, and also Saida. The history of public housing and also the issue of capitalism. I'm not going to go into capitalism right now because you did a wonderful job of doing that. But the history of public housing and the narrative that's actually being set with the idea that you can own a home afterwards. So I want to focus on the idea of what's called a false narrative. You see, first and foremost, the way housing has been presented to people is that it's something that allows us to build wealth, it's something that allows us to build community, it's something that allows us to pass on wealth to the next generation. BMR units don't necessarily do that. So let's just take that off the table first and foremost. BMR units do not really do that. If you're taking BMR units off the table, then you're left with market rate homes in San Francisco. So when I have a tenant, and so just as a heads up, I work with Housing Rights Community of San Francisco, so I work with an organization. So when I have tenants that actually ask me, so I want to go own a home, and I'm like, yeah, for sure. I mean, like, you mean like in Antioch, right? Because you're not owning a home in San Francisco. I don't care how many programs you get and how much whatever you say, you're not going to own a home in San Francisco if your income is hovering around $50,000 to $60,000 or $70,000. It's not going to happen. I can't do it. I know what my income is. I can't do it. I doubt that many of y'all can do it. So if many of y'all can't do it, why are we trying to be like, oh yeah, one day you're going to own a home? That's what's called the false narrative. The question is though, is that false narrative actually reproducing a trauma or is it not? Is it something that's actually presenting a proper pathway for development, or is it not? There are two programs, and I'm just going to focus on the two programs that were actually presented to home ownership that actually happened in the US, and I'll be real quick with this because I don't want to take up too much time. So the Homesteading Act of 1850, and then you also have urban renewal that happened back in the 60s. The requirement for both of those was you had to be a white male. It wasn't no credit check. There wasn't no, you had to do this for 15 years. It wasn't like that. It was like, yeah, you blue eyes and blonde hair, here's some land. We kicked some people off of it, you got it now. The history of public housing, though, is really important because that was the other circumstance in which other white people were able to actually get another leg up through going through public housing to then exit and get a home. But if we're going to continue that narrative today, that is what's called a false narrative. Today, public housing will not produce the same outcome as what it did back in the 60s, in which you will have an outcome of owning a home. So if we're trying to actually, if we're positioning ourselves on the premise that public housing is a temporary solution and that one day you can move out, that's a false narrative. If we are positioning ourselves on that narrative, then we are looking at the community that we're actually helping as one day you should be moving out. And if you are not moving out, then something is wrong. Either it is wrong with my program or it is wrong with you. And if we are saying that it is wrong with you and not looking at our program, then we're already stepping on really faulty ground. So I'm happy to be able to actually pose this question to y'all. I'll end with this right here because I don't want to overtalk it, but I'm happy to be able to speak to everybody who was wonderful here because I never get to actually do this all in one room. This takes like years to do, like one by one by one by one. Yeah. Clearly, purple don't live in Potrero Hill because that would have been a bait and switch. But I'm not going to go into that right now. To be real about it, in terms of the work that we are all doing right now, and something that Jason and I have talked about tremendously, is we have this wonderful time to actually experiment with creating real community. When we talk about owning a home, what we're talking about is actually building community, building, wealth or community or whatever that sort. So we have this wonderful opportunity to actually do that right here with what we're having right now. If we stop actually thinking about public housing as like a temporary solution and people need to be pushed out into something else, I think if we really dig into that, and it's a challenge to y'all, if we really dig into that, I'd really like to see what might come out of that. And so I'll end with that right there. Kind of the challenge is like reframe the narrative. To think of the other things that might be able to be thought about in terms like what does it mean to develop community in the most authentic of ways and not use or step on false narratives. Thank you, Drew. And the places here and the places now in San Francisco, it can happen here versus somewhere else in the nation. It can really actually happen here. So I'll end with that right there.
Thank you. I think that's a good note to end on. And so use your written things. I think that Suleiman threw out an idea for another seminar, and anything else that came up today. Again, I want to thank all of you for participating. Thank you to our panelists. And also, thank you to all of the people who came up and asked questions, and particularly all the people who shared personal stories. It made the seminar very lively and eventful.
All right, thank you so much, Cindy. And please give another round of applause for our amazing panel and moderator. Thank you so much.